and they had a straw poll, and we won that with 35% of the vote. Second place was 18%. And you know what's encouraging about that, Rita, is if you look at those two groups, Freedom Works tends to be more libertarian and Tea Party. Value Voters tends to be more evangelical and socially conservative. Those are two disparate parts of the Republican primary base, and yet we're seeing overwhelming support really across the spectrum of Republican primary voters, and that's very, very encouraging.
Well, and in some of course, like I've looked at a number of polls in Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, you're 6, 5, and 4, so you're doing very well, still in the middle of the pack. Do you see Donald Trump faltering? Do you see him waning?
You know, I like Donald. I respect him. There have been other candidates in this race who've gone out of their way to try to smack Donald with a 2x4, and I haven't been one of them. I am glad he's in the race. And I'll note, you know, I think the most beneficial thing Donald Trump's involvement in the race has been, I think his involvement has been tremendously helpful to my campaign because it's framed the central question of this primary as who will stand up to Washington. And if that's the central question, the natural next question that any voter will ask is, okay, well, who actually has stood up to Washington? Who has a record in that regard?
Do you believe eventually you could beat him based on your principles?
I think that's right. I think in time, I don't believe Donald is going to be the nominee, and I think in time, the lion's share of his supporters end up with us. And I think the reason is what I was just saying, that if you look to the records of all the Republican candidates, there's a big difference between my record and that of everyone else. If you ask who has stood up to Washington, who's taken on not just Democrats, but taken on leaders in their own party, Republican leadership, whether it was leading the fight to stop Obamacare, whether it was leading the fight to stop executive amnesty,